know that the U.S. Postal Service claims that it will always deliver? Rain or snow or sleet, it delivers. Well, they were saying that back in 1939. And this is keeper Norwood, and this is his wife Josephine and his daughter Grace. And look at the smile on the keeper's face. This was a planned exchange, yes. And look, she's handing the letter, receiving the letter from the Postal Service boat. Well, actually, it was the Lighthouse tender that brought it. So even back in 1939, the U.S. Postal Service was proud that it delivered on any weather and anywhere. Good afternoon. I am honored to be on the Coast Guard payroll and to be the keeper of the last manned Coast Guard light station in the entire country. And I jokingly say, womaned. I'm the 70th keeper, and the first 69 were all men. So there's a reason why I wear a costume, and the Coast Guard has 4 components to it. The active duty, reserve, civilian, that's me. I don't wear a uniform, have no law enforcement capabilities, and the Coast Guard auxiliary volunteers that are uniformed but are not law enforcement. And once upon a time, I was volunteering out at Boston Light as an auxiliarist. And I transitioned from being a volunteer to on the payroll, and they said, Sally, you can't wear the uniform anymore, but we want you to stand out from the crowd. Well, did I do good? Am I standing out? So that's why I wear the bonnet. So when I come public speaking to places like here, or if you were to come out to Boston Light and visit us out there, you would see me in costume. And this is my home away from home. It was first established in 1716. So do the quick math, that's 300 years ago. And it's still doing exactly what it was intended to do back 300 years ago. How many things can you think of that are still functioning as intended 300 years later? This is pretty spectacular. Now, the technology has significantly changed. However, the purpose to be a major aids to navigation into the entrance of Boston Harbor Islands, that's its mission today as well. And the tower that you're looking at in this photo is not the one built in 1716. We had something called the Revolutionary War, 1776. The British said, well, if we can't have that tower, we're certainly not going to let the revolutionists have it, and they blew it up on the way out of Dodge. This is the new one, 1783. Not that new, right? But it's not 1716. The costume that I'm wearing is the style of dress that the women would have worn in 1783. And you might be thinking, well, why don't I wear 1716 garb? Well, that's because there is one tower in the country that is the oldest standing tower in the country. It's called Sandy Hook down in New Jersey. That was built in 1764. And although the British fired upon it, it did not blow it up. It is still standing today. So when visitors come to Little Brewster Island to visit us, I'll say, how many are New Jerseyites? Do we have anybody from New Jersey here today? Ah, we have one. We know our history. That is the oldest standing tower in the United States. So what's our claim to fame is that it was the first established light station in colonial America. And there's a congressional law of 1989 that says it shall remain manned with a Coast Guard presence. So I jokingly say, it's now womaned. So there are some lighthouses that sit right in the water, and there's no property around it. Little Brewster Island is 1.5 acres at high tide, 3 acres at low tide. So you're looking at a picture that's about half tide right now. And so we don't live in the tower itself. We live in the house that's to the left, the principal's keeper's house. The other buildings that still exist on the island today, we're going to be able to see close-up pictures of each of those. And if you see in the background, up at the upper left, what you will see is the digestive plant over on Deer Island. So that's the angle that we're looking at right now. So we're looking at U.S. Coast Guard Light Station Boston from 1716 to 2016, and welcome. And we have a beautiful 300th anniversary logo. And it looks back into the olden days and then the current day with the city of Boston in the background and a container ship with Boston Light still leading the way forward. And Suzanne Golmash has a beautiful t-shirt. Suzanne, would you please stand up and show them your gorgeous t-shirt? Isn't that beautiful? Thank you. Lighting the way forward since 1716. And so what we have is for our celebration, the official date was the 14th of September. And it's a Wednesday, and the ceremony was in the morning. And where are all you students on a Wednesday morning on the 14th of September? In school, probably? Okay, so that wasn't a good time to be inviting students to the ceremony. So what we did on George's Island, have any of you been to the outer islands, to George's? Excellent. So you know that there's a fort and there's an area that we call the Edwardo Snow Pavilion. You may put your hands down. At the Edwardo Snow Pavilion, he was a historian in the area that really loved George's Island and did a lot to promote it to be preserved. And so the Friends of Boston Harbor spearheaded to have this pavilion built. And so not only were we celebrating Boston Light's 300th birthday on the 21st of August this past summer, but also Edwardo Snow's birthday. And look at all the people that are there. There were over 550. And two things brought all the visitors out of the fort to come visit us. One was they heard the whop, 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 whop of a helicopter landing. And you know who came out of the helicopter? Flying Santa. Anyone know of Flying Santa? Did you ever hear of that lore? Back in 1929, it all started up in Maine with Bill Wincapaw. That was an airplane pilot that delivered mail to the islands offshore of Maine. And he used the lighthouses to get him home safely to Rockland, Maine. So not only did ships and lobstermen and fisherwomen use lighthouses, but also pilots. So he started this tradition of going to the lighthouse keepers and gifting them gifts, saying thank you. And the lighthouses back then had families, they were children. So that is in Edwardo Snow started doing it in the Boston area and in the New England area back in around 1936-37. And look at this beautiful cake. Isn't that gorgeous? Made of styrofoam up top, and it was a sheet cake down below. And if anybody knows Montilio Bakeries, if you're from south of Boston, yummy. This is George Montilio, and he donated the cake and made this beautiful rendition. Isn't that gorgeous? And you recognize the keeper on the left. The woman on the right is Edwardo Snow's daughter, Dolly. And then, that was on the 21st of August, a beautiful sunny day in August. And this was the ceremony for our 300th ceremony on Long Wharf by the Marriott. And we had the Commandant of the Coast Guard. And the Commandant, imagine a big national company that has a CEO and a president. Well, that's what the Commandant is to the Coast Guard. It's the top chief person. He was here. Amazing. And this is him with, we have three other people here. To the far left is the mayor of Boston, and next to him is the superintendent of the Boston Harbor National Park, the Commandant, and then Kathy Abbott. The Park Service has a fundraising agency to help support the Boston Harbor Islands, and she is the president and CEO of that organization, and she was able to accept this donation from George. So not only did we have the cake out at George's Island, but we also had it at Long Wharf. And then we went out to Little Brewster Island. The dignitaries of the dignitaries got on a big boat, went out to Boston Light, where we had our 300th anniversary plaque unveiled. So that's what happened in 2016. How did we get there? Well, we had to make sure that the island looked spiffy. So in 2014, the Coast Guard spent $1.5 million to put new roofs on the house, and this is what it looked like. We called it the Little Brewster Island Campground. We had as many as 10 contractors living on the island in pup tents and one trailer, and then there was another 8 that would come for the day. Now, do you see the scaffolding around all those buildings? We were living out there. They were working inside the house and outside the house, very noisy, and all the buildings were, for the most part, being worked on all at the same time for 5 months. That was a long 2014. And this is a close-up of what that looked like. They went all the way up to the top of the tower so that they could refurbish the top of the lens, the copper roof. And then, you know what they discovered? In the beginning, I said this was not the original tower in 1716. Well, that's only a partial truth, because we found out that the bottom, 9 to 14 feet, is the original tower built in 1716. What a find that was. And then we can see in 1783, the newer one. Now look at the size of the blocks. They're irregular and they're small. And look at how these are more square and better cut. So now it's all stucco, so unless you know how to look at the tower, you can't really see that distinction, but we know, and that's all that matters. And what's behind those round and rectangular granite stone? It's called Rubble Stone. It could have been taken right off the beach of Little Brewster Island for all we know. And then we saw one granite, which was cherry color red. And I've seen different colored granite, but none a bright cherry red. So I said to the contractors, wow, where did they get bright cherry red granite? And they said, oh, that was not that. That's what happens when granite is put under stress, like having an explosion in the tower. Isn't that amazing? Another piece of history. That is granite that had experienced the detonation of the black powder back in 1776. This is a close-up of the keeper's house. That's where we live in the summertime. Very busy that summer, 2014. Now it's beautiful. They hadn't quite finished the cellar, painting the cellar yet, but everything else is done. And then we have the boathouse. The cellar is finished painted, and the tower in the background. We have the boathouse, the cistern building. A cistern building. Well, a cistern is a swimming pool or a container of any size that holds a lot of water. Just so happens we have a huge one. It holds 22,000 gallons of water, and this is the building. Well, why does it have to be in a building? To collect rainwater, the gutters that then go into the cistern, and that is the water we use to this very day. We just don't drink it because seagulls like to perch up there. They do their poopies. It gets washed down into the cistern. We don't want to drink that water. And then we have the fog signal building. And then we have the tower, and in the forefront is what we call what was the oil house. So a need for a lighthouse in 1716. Well, what happened? Back in 1716, this was a fledgling colony. Ships were coming over from Europe. They were bringing people to populate the place. They were bringing goods because we were not manufacturing anything. We were catching a lot of cod, we were cutting a lot of trees and sending them back to Europe. But other than that, everything that we needed had to come by ship. And what was happening is they were floundering on the islands out here and along Nantasket Beach in the shore of the town of Hull. It's a mile distance between Little Brewster Island and Hull. So imagine sailing 3,000 miles across the Atlantic, and it's a stormy night, and you think you need to take a turn to get into the harbor, and you turn too soon. What happened is they fouled on the ledges and the rocks out here, and the ships cracked open like an egg crate, and the cargo went into the water, the ships went down, the people died. And how can you build a colony if you don't have goods and you don't have people? So they said, we need a lighthouse, we need a lighthouse. And in 1716, they built one right here. The choice was at Little Brewster or over here on the elbow of the town of Hull. But the town of Hull is on the mainland. And when ships wrecked there was the ability to go and help the people and get the cargo and even salvage the ship most of the time. But out here, there was no opportunity to do that. So they chose here, that little island. And this is the way they went into the harbor where the dots are. Everything in gray is the mainland, and you see the green part? We're going to get to another story in a few minutes. It's called the Boston Harbor Islands National and State Park. Everything in green belongs within the parameters of the park. Now, what did the Little Brewster Island look like back in 1716? Well, there are no photographs, so this is a rendition of what it may have looked like. If you notice the trees, I think those trees are long gone. They're not there now. And then 3 years after the Lighthouse was established in 1719, it also needed a fog signal. Because what happened when there was lousy weather and you couldn't see the light? You listened for the sound, and they used black powder in the cannon to go ba-boom, to let the ships know that not to get too close to Little Brewster. In 1900, this ship right here totally missed the turn. This is Little Brewster Island, Great Brewster Island's over here. Would you believe that still happens today? We have a lot of small boats that don't know how to read a chart and find themselves there, such as this. This was taken this past summer. Now some reminiscences. 1830. This is what Little Brewster Island looked like. And we've got a fisher person down in here with sailboats here. And there's the fog signal gone right there. This is what it looked like in 1876. In 1859, if we look up at the tower, way up there, you can't see this beautiful crystal because during the daytime, it was shades were put up so that the sun would not be directly on it because it could have damaged the light. So in 1859, can you do some quick math to figure out how old that is, like more than 150 years old? And what is so remarkable, that within the Boston Harbor Islands National and State Park, Boston Light has tours 16 weeks during the summer, where visitors that are capable of doing it climb 76 spiral stairs and 2 ladders to be nose to nose with that lens that has been there since 1859. And what turns that? We see a flash every 10 seconds in the gear room that 4,000 pounds of glass and brass gets rotated by what we call truck or chariot wheels. Now, this is 21st century. This is 19th century technology. Sometimes there's a little hiccup, and it sometimes doesn't work properly. We're going to get back to that in a few minutes, what happens. This is one of our earliest photographs out at Little Brewster Island, 1875. And here's a man sitting here and a little girl right there. And that was before the house that you saw in the previous slide was even in existence. If you see here, we have the keeper's house, and on the right-hand side was the assistant keeper, and then we had the principal keeper on this side with a connector going into the tower. And then in 1884, the house you saw in the previous slide, a few previous ones. That's the house that exists today. This one is gone. And it grew up. Look at what that looked like here. It had the roof raised to be big like that. And then what happened is they took the connector doorway between the two buildings, the assistant keeper's house, and over to what we now call the museum room. And so this is what it looks like back in 1896, and it looks the same today. And the Lighthouse had a 200th anniversary party back in 1916, and this is the plaque that they brought in. It is in the base of the tower. In the new one that we just got a few weeks ago, we'll be going right under that one in the tower. This is a photo of 1920, what it looked like. Another one of 1920. And I love this photo because initially with the fog signal in the 1850s, the foghorn was activated by steam. And they needed a lot of coal to make the steam, as in 40 tons of coal a year. And then they converted, or started to converge to oil, and this was the oil boat that brought the oil. So that's a very unique photo. And I love this story. Do you know that the U.S. Postal Service claims that it will always deliver? Rain or snow or sleet, it delivers. Well, they were saying that back in 1939. And this is Keeper Norwood, and this is his wife Josephine and his daughter Grace. And look at the smile on the keeper's face. This was a planned exchange, yes. And look, she's handing the letter, receiving the letter from the Postal Service boat. Well, actually, it was the Lighthouse tender that brought it. So even back in 1939, the U.S. Postal Service was proud that it delivered on any weather and anywhere. And you know who else delivered? Flying Santa. And this is December of 1937. Bigfoot at that time was a restaurant chain, and Bigfoot donated the airplane for Edward O. Snow to be able to drop the gifts. And this is Edward O. Snow and family packing the gifts in 1958. And earlier we saw a picture of Dolly, what Edward O. Snow's, I'm looking for this button here. This is Edward O. Snow, his wife, and a Dolly, and these were the friends and family that were bundling things up. And if you see the arrow on the screen, that was the bundle. It was a good thing it was low tide. It would have ended up on the water otherwise. And here is the keeper waving to Flying Santa with the bundle coming down right here, and then retrieving it in 1957, going into the house, opening it up. And what kind of goodies did they have? Well, if they knew they had children, they were coloring books and crayons. And for the adults, cigarettes, newspapers, books, balloons, all sorts of fun stuff. So now we're moving on to newer photos here of what the island looked like when it had they would have a station boat. And the way the boat got into the boathouse was by, sorry about that, folks, the railroad tracks, and there it is there. This is Coast Guard Station Point Island, and they were visiting that day. And then there was a motor right here that would pull the boat into the boathouse, which is right here, with the two piers. Now, the two piers were facing Boston, which is the westerly direction of prevailing winds. It can be very, very rough out there. So by having these two piers, the boat was able to come into safe water to land. And now Edward O. Snow, there were some people that nodded they knew of Edward O. Snow. And he had his harbor, I always forget the R word. Jay, can you help me? The Ramblers. And this is some of them right here having a swim in between those two piers. And this is an aerial of the island with the assistant keeper's house, the principal keeper's house, the tower, cistern building, fog signal building, and the oil house. And then you'll notice another picture. What happened is this was a family lighthouse station until 1958. The last family that was out there was the Horner family, when a minister, Reverend Ward, christened both the baby and the young girl. It just so happens that I grew up at Pilgrim Church in North Weymouth, Massachusetts. He was the minister back then, and this is him, and I recognized him. And I think it's so funny that this was found in the church archival files. And then in 1960, they made it a stag station, all male, and they didn't need the assistant keeper's house anymore, so they got rid of it. It went away. So if you notice, there's no big house. It significantly changed the contour of the island, and believe it or not, the island hasn't changed much since 1960 when that happened. And so what does it mean to be a stag station? It was all male, and they called the principal keeper's house the barracks. There were 3, sometimes 4 active duty that were stationed there. And what's amazing is, see this coffee table? It was made by the active duty back in the 1960s. It's still there. It's the coffee table we sit at with our tea and coffee every day at the light. Now, we have a story about public access. Remember what I mentioned on the map that there were some green areas? They are the islands and peninsulas that make up the Boston Harbor Islands National and State Park. In 1999, that was formed. But prior to that, the Friends of Boston Harbor Islands were ones that provided public tours 3 times a year, starting in the mid-1980s. And so in 1999, when the Park Service began its pilot program, the Friends still held at least one of their tours. And so this was their tour. They had like 110 people on this particular one. And the other way you could get to the island was like by kayak, or if you had a powerboat, a sailboat, you anchor, and then you rode into the beach. And now with the Boston Harbor Islands National and State Park, we have a partnership that provides us the ability to have tours out there for 16 weeks during the summer. Right now, when you go out to Boston Lake, this is what it looks like. This is how I now get on the island. I go up that ladder at the face of the pier. The Park Service built a $1.8 million dock system for their tours. And so this is how you come out for those 16 weeks. And this is the boat. The motor vessel Columbia Point belongs to UMass Boston, and we limit the tours to 40 people at a time, and it's coming into the dock. Notice it's backing in its stern. That's sort of a weird way to unload the boat, right? Not many of those in the harbor. This may be the only one. Then you come off the boat, you go up to the boathouse for a welcoming, and we staff the island with not only myself, but the Coast Guard Auxiliary in their uniform. We have the rangers that provide the tour of the tower, and the Friends of Boston Harbor Islands. And this is the inside of our visitor center. Then we don't give you a guided tour of the island. We let you meander the 1.5 acres, and you can interact with the staff as much as little as you want, unless you go in forbidden areas, and then we beckon you back. So you can go and you can visit the cistern building, find out about that and a little bit about navigation. You can go to the base of the tower to enter into the tower and see our museum, which looks like this. And then for those who are climbing, there's 76 spiral stairs, a ladder into the gear room, and into the lantern room, where you stand by that 11-foot crystal that's been there since 1859. And you can look out to see the far expanse of the universe. And then when you're climbing either up and down the ladder, look inside that lens made up of 336 individual prisms. Talk about technology. And this is the people that are in the lantern room And that could be you if you can maneuver up those 76 spiral stairs and 2 ladders. And this is the view of Boston that you can see on a clear day. And then 90 minutes later, you reboard the boat and you head back to Boston. Milestones. We went from a lamp like this called an incandescent vapor oil lamp to electrical in 1948. We became a national landmark in 1964. That we went civilian, we went from family keeping on the island to a stag all male, and now to a civilian Coast Guard keeper, me. And this was the ceremony out at the island in 2003. And then the last Coast Guard personnel, his name was Ben O'Brien. He was leaving Boston Light, but he signed up for another 4 years. But before you leave as the keeper of Boston Light, you engrave your initials or name in the stone. So this was Ben's last deed in June of 2004. And the oldest book of graffiti on the island is 1768. So you can come and walk the grounds. There's over 250 engravings on the rocks found thus far. And then we can't finish telling the story without talking about Sammy. He's the last official Coast Guard light station dog, black lab, 1997 to 2004. He and I were big buddies. And then we're back to 2016, our 300th anniversary. And do we need to continue having the light? Absolutely. And because sometimes the light malfunctions, we have a backup system. And it is with solar. So this little solar panel, it gives backup lights if the light's out. See, the light was broken. So the backup worked. And then this is what it looks like, close up. And then a fog signal is done by the Mariner by going on a marine radio, channel 81 alpha. You click the mic 5 times and you'll hear it go beep every 30 seconds. Pretty clever, huh? And here we are. We're back at the end. Do you see the angel wings? That was a sunset this summer. Wasn't that awesome? And this is Boston Light at night. And always an adventure.
My question was, what year was this built?
Still can't hear.
What year was the current one built in? The current lighthouse. What year was it finished in?
Oh, the current lighthouse that stands today was built in 1783, but we know the base was 1716, and it was refurbished in 2014.
How can the lighthouse be seen from 27 nautical miles?
The lighthouse can be seen for 27 nautical miles, that 10-second flash, and that is the average of when you are on a ship's helm that you can see the light. But you know what? That's just on the water. I had an opportunity to be the elf for Flying Santa, and we were flying in a helicopter, and we were inland 40 miles. And I looked out the right side of the helicopter window and I saw this flashing every 10 seconds, and I said to the pilot, "Is that what I think it is?" And they said yes. So we know we can see it for at least 40 miles. It has to do with the curvature of the earth.
Who was the first person who lit the lighthouse? Like turn it on?
I didn't get the whole question.
Who was the first person who lit the lighthouse?
The first person who turned on the light was George Worthylake. And he, unfortunately, after 2 years of doing that, he drowned. His small boat capsized, and he drowned. And he drowned with his daughter and his wife. And that is in the burial ground right here in the north end. So that's something that the class might want to take a walk and find the Worthylake grave. It's a 3, They're all buried and their names are on one headstone.
Who made the lighthouse?
Who made the lighthouse? Back in 1716, whoever made it, they never left us a record. So we don't know the name of the company that did it.
Why were you the only woman lighthouse keeper?
Oh, why have I been the only woman lighthouse keeper? Well, because initially it was a civilian keeper from the lighthouse service, and it just so happens they were all men. They were women keepers at other lighthouses, but never at Boston Light. And then in 1960, it became a stag station, where it was for men only. And we broke the rule. In 2003, they hired a woman. Yahoo!
How old was the original lighthouse?
The original lighthouse was built in 1716, so that's 300 years ago. How long did the lighthouse, the original 1716, last for? It lasted until the British blew it up in 1776. But we now know the first 9 to 14 feet is that original one.
How many lighthouses did the Senate build?
How many lighthouses were built?
Did the Senate build?
I do not know. I do not know the answer to that one. That's a good question.
Why is there an iron door?
Okay, I'm still not hearing.
Why is there an iron door?
I'm still not hearing
An
it. Sorry.
iron door?
The what?
Why is there an iron door?
Oh, an iron door. Yes. Imagine when they first built the house, we have what we call the oil room that became the museum room. When they first built the tower in 1716, they didn't have that little building there. They had to have an entrance. So there's actually 2 sets of iron doors, which were replaced in 1844. And how do we know that? It's engraved right on the door.
When did the fire start?
Oh, the fire, referring to the fire, the explosion of the tower in 1776. That was done by black powder. The British came to the island and they detonated it. And so that once they left, it was on a timer, like a bomb, and it went off. So it was lots of enough black powder to disable the tower that it was believed that the whole thing was broken, but it was not, or blew up. That the base is still the original.
Because the first keeper, George Worthylake, drowned, and also I think the next 2 drowned, and also because of how much the light suffered during the Revolution, does anyone think that the light is cursed?
Was anybody hurt when the tower was blown up? No, the British put it on a timer so that they set it, they left the island, and then it exploded, so nobody got hurt.
Why was the lighthouse blown up in the first place? And can I say hi to my mom? Hi, Mom.
Okay, I didn't hear the question.
So the question was, why was the lighthouse blown up in the first place? And a hello to your mom.
Okay, it was blown up in 1776 because it was the beginning of the Revolutionary War. And the British said, if we can't have that lighthouse, we're certainly not going to let the revolutionists have it, and they blew it up on the way out of Dodge. So they made it so that the revolutionists, the colonists, could not use that lighthouse for the ships to be able to safely get into the harbor.
Several lighthouses down on Cape Cod and Martha's Vineyard have been moved in recent years due to erosion of the sand cliffs. Is Boston Light in any danger from erosion?
Is Boston Light in danger of falling off its perch? Well, the thing is, because it's a 1.5 acre island and it's made of stone, if they wanted to move the tower, as they did the ones down on the Cape, they could not. It would pull the helicopter out of the sky. And they couldn't roll it like they did at the Garnet Light, where they put it on rollers and beams and they rolled it. The island's too small. So we're just going to hope that it's been there for 300 years, that it will stay for at least another 100. And that's all we have time for today. But my husband and I will be staying. We'll be over that side, and we'll be happy to chat with you.
You think back, Boston Harbor was where it all began in many ways for the whole maritime economy of the colonies, and Boston's history, sort of indivisible, but both from Boston's history and American history. And yet, through the 20th century, it was allowed to become a cesspool of human waste. All right, now my prediction didn't.